Today is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. It is 3:31 p.m. This is Lacey Brooks representing the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. I am interviewing Pam Miller for the Savannah LGBTQ plus Oral History Project. We are conducting this interview in Savannah, Georgia via Zoom. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start by having you tell us your full name, and if necessary, please spell your name.
Pamela, Ann, A-N-N-E, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.
Okay. And please tell us your pronouns and how you identify.
She, her.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Miami, Florida in 1950.
And when did you come to Savannah and why?
I came to Savannah in 1996. I came over here for two reasons. One, I met my partner and came over here for that. And I also came over here to run a behavioral health collaborative.
So can you speak to the job? You said the behavioral, what was it again? I'm sorry.
So my career was in behavioral health. I did a lot of addictions treatment for probably going back to the 80s. And so I came here, I ran a hospital in Atlanta, and then there was a job opportunity over here that was kind of coinciding with a new relationship. So I came over from Atlanta to Savannah in 96.
And you said that you met, did you say you met your partner here in Savannah when you met? Or
met online back in the early 90s when it was still not really a thing, but yeah.
So at that time you decided to relocate to Savannah. So when you moved to Savannah, what were your early experiences like in Savannah in 1996?
Well, when I first got here, one of the first things I was interested in was looking at what the LGBTQ community had to offer. I've been a lifelong activist starting back in the 70s, so I've always been involved wherever I lived. So I was looking for something here that I could get involved with. And the first thing I found was actually a social group called First City Network. And I joined First City Network in 1996 when I first got here. And it was a great way to socialize with other people in the community without it being, a typical at that time bar scene kind of way to meet people. It was, there were monthly meetings like social potlucks, that sort of thing. So it was a little bit different than the norm way of meeting people. So it was a lot of fun. So I got involved and still am a member to this day.
And can you talk about so you said there were potlucks, and I've heard about that before. Can you talk about other areas, places that you might have experienced or gone to when you first came to Savannah in the 90s that you are familiar with?
Well,
places?
Really, as far as LGBTQ stuff, that was pretty much what was here. There was a lesbian potluck that had it, and they had boys' night out, and then they had a combined social called the potluck. And then, of course, the group First City Network was also had a board, officers, that sort of thing, did fundraisers. We had annual functions like an oyster roast. It was our operating capital big earner every year. And so probably in the late 90s, maybe 98, 99, somewhere around there, I actually had been a member of the board from early on. And then I became co-chair of First City Network for about 8 years. And First City Network is the oldest LGBT organization in the state of Georgia. We predate everybody else, the only one in existence for so many years.
So did you think Savannah at that time was an inclusive community in 96? Did you feel that it was inclusive or safe?
I don't know that I would call it inclusive, but it didn't feel real dangerous, if that makes any sense. you could still go places. There didn't feel like there was a lot of harassment sort of issues. I'm coming from Atlanta, where it was a lot more open and a lot less of an issue. Coming over here, there was still some. You still had to be careful, but overall, I think the Savannah has always been kind of a live and let live community, hasn't it? Going back to Sherman, it's like, we don't care, just leave us alone, move along. And so as long as that was going on, I think that Savannah, while it wasn't embracing the diversity, it was certainly not doing a lot to really impact it in a negative way. We could have our festivals, we could do, start our pride back then, all of those kinds of things, and had the city's support of that.
So speaking of that, are there events that need to be documented for this that were going on in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s that you can think of?
Well, there were, I think the biggest thing besides First City Network and Standout Youth at the time, which was a program for young people that were questioning or were absolutely sure about their sexuality, they could go and find a safe place. That was Standout Youth. Standout Youth was here for a long time. It's now, I think they have another program called Jeffrey's Place, and Standout Youth or SOY has sort of just been taken over by that. But there was one gentleman named Gene Graves who came from like Brunswick every week for maybe one child. So, I mean, that was, just because he would be there so that no child would ever come and not have somebody to be there. So, we did that. We were at the old, I'm not going to remember the name of the church, but it's the Jingle Bells Church. So one downtown, I always call it the Jingle Bells Church.
Is that Savannah Christian or First?
I can't remember, but anyway, it was the Jingle Bells Church, and we would go. That's where we had our. They allowed us to have a small space there, which is where we did our meetings. We opened an LGBT library because back then, acronyms keep changing. And so we do the LGBTQ plus because there's QIA, and it could go on and on. So we just abbreviated to the LGBTQ plus. But we opened up a library there with a lot of materials that were gay friendly, gay oriented, gay writers that were donations from people in the community. And it would be open every Saturday for people to come drop by, kind of do a meet and greet, just sit there, read a book, or sit there and, talk to other folks in the community. So we were trying back then to create safe spaces. First City Network was about, if you look at the earliest logo, and I think the archives are copying all those, were images of slats or what it was to be like doors. And then faces were peering out of the door. So it was basically coming out of the closet and finding each other. So First City Network's ideas: come out of the closet, find each other. We're here, we're queer, we're supportive. You've got a good place to go. So that was their early logo. And that's what the whole idea of First City Network was about, was really a community organization to try to bring people of like minds together. And we did that through those various functions I was telling you about, and the potlucks and the socials and the annual oyster roast, which was a big deal. So at some point that then spun off, and I mean, you can stop me when you want, but that sort of spun off into Pride. So Pride was first created under the umbrella of First City Network because we had the 501c3. So I can remember the very first days of the Pride meetings, trying to figure out if we would be safe. I mean, we felt like we would be, but we thought, this is going to be the largest public gathering, and the most visible we have ever been in Savannah. And how safe will we be? And so the first group opted to actually hold it at the roundhouse, not the roundhouse. Well, yes, the roundhouse. So, and because you could cordon it off. There was parking and then there was a fence, and we had, so it was all that open. That's where the Children's Museum is now, I think. So that whole area, it was perfect because it was big, it was open. We had a lot of little spaces. We had room to put a stage up there, and it was very successful. We had a great attendance for our first Pride, and we really weren't sure we were going to be able to pull it off, if we were going to be able to afford it. We got through by the skin of our teeth. And Pride grew from there. So, I mean, that's another thing that First City Network did while I was there. So it was really exciting. It was an exciting time. We started to do some, not oral histories, but written histories. We were doing coming out stories. I don't know if those are still in the archives. Unfortunately, a lot of that stuff moved around a lot. But we did every year for National Coming Out Day, we would hold the library open, and I created a form for people to come in and write down their coming out story if they wanted to, and that went in a booklet somewhere. I don't know where it is. So, but
that was part of First City Network.
May or may not be in the archives because they just moved around so much. To be honest with you, they were in people's garages. We lost that space, and we didn't have the money for another space, and somebody would hold some of this and somebody would hold some of that. And, I don't know that we ever will really know. I know we've probably been able to garner most of the back issues of the network news. So hopefully that's all there. And you'll notice in that there's going to be a change in the logo. And the logo goes from looking out the closets. And back in, I can't even remember when it was anymore. Sorry, I've slept a few nights since then. But it was I think maybe our 20th anniversary, and I was asked to speak out at Gulfstream, and I got it about LGBTQ history. It was very interesting because they did it as part of their diversity programming, and I was given a $3,500 honorarium, which I was donating to First City Network, of course, and used that to revamp the logo. Because at that point, we were basically out of our closets. We were out and we were doing things. So if you look at the newer logo, you'll see that not only is it no longer in black and white, now we're the colors of the rainbow. And now the faces are out and we're all looking up and forward. So it was just, the whole logo was designed to show the progression in Savannah of how we've moved. So you'll notice that in the archives. Not many people know that story. I try to tell it as often as possible, but I'm getting old and I don't want it to be forgotten. So I'm really grateful for this. That's why that came about.
Good. So, can you talk about when you came out and what kind of experience you had?
Yeah, honestly, I was born in 1950. In high school, I was conflicted. But I felt, I was one of those kids raised in a very, Catholic family and all of that. So it was the whole concept of my life was to be get married, have children, get married, have children. So I followed what I was told to do. And I got married and I had children. And I'm so grateful for those children today. Marriage didn't last, but the kids sure did. And I'm grateful for that. Because I'm now a grandmother and a great grandmother. So that's been, but then as I started to, I guess I was probably in my 20s and, I was kind of flitting back and forth, but I still had children and I really wasn't sure. And, back then there were so many things. I mean, when I got married in the 70s, women couldn't even have their own credit cards. I mean, if you were to come out and say I'm gay or lesbian, not only could you'd lose your job, everything, there's so much prejudice against that. So, I mean, I just didn't. And so I came out later in life, probably, well, I think I had a soft coming out and then I had a hard coming out. And my hard coming out was when I never went back. And that was in my, I guess, 40. I was almost 40 when I had my hard coming out. But, before that time, it was just more. That was it was before that because it was in the 80s. So probably about 1985. So, and then from that point on, I never looked back, but, so. And then
Were you in Atlanta during that time, or were you somewhere else?
No, at that time I was in West Palm Beach, Florida. Now, see, I had been active in activism around um, social issues, women's issues, that back then it was GLBT. There was no L didn't come first. It was the G came first. And so in the 70s, I actually marched and protest against Anita Bryant when she did all of her stuff in Florida. So that was my first gay protest. In the 60s, I protested the war, but I've always been one of those people. I've always been, activist for human and civil rights. So, that goes back then. And in the 70s, and I would say even early 80s, the best way for lesbians to get involved because there was no lesbian thing, is we joined national movements like the National Organization of Women. And there was a lot of lesbians in those groups that were, looking for people like themselves, but without, flying a banner because it was still too dangerous, so that's when it started. And then as things got progressively, I think, easier to stand on your own, then we became more visible, more verbal. And I think I was part of that rise.
When you came to Savannah in the mid 90s, and were there other organizations that you participated in, or maybe you've been active in creating since
One
then?
of the first ones I was active in that had been created was the Ryan White Fund for HIV allocation. And so I did that here for Chatham County. And at the time I worked with other agencies, but not part of their agencies, like My Brother's Keeper or Project Azuka. Project Azuka was for HIV positive women. And because that was an aspect of HIV awareness that wasn't really being looked at, because people assumed that it was still a gay disease, And so Project Azuka was here. Unfortunately, the founder of that, Pandora Singleton, died as a result of a surgery. So, we lost a really fierce warrior in that regard. And but My Brother's Keeper, Mark Douglas, was the executive director of that, and that dealt a lot with. It helped break the stigma of the African American HIV person, because there was there was a fast growing segment of the population that was becoming HIV positive, but was still not able to necessarily look at that. So My Brother's Keeper did a lot of that. So I was involved in the periphery on those kinds of things in the 80s and 90s. So I was really pretty much with First City Network. I did a lot with them for years. That was a lot. During that time, I guess due to my work, my name got put on the Wall of Tolerance in Birmingham, Alabama. And yeah, it was very, for certificate signed, if you will, by Rosa Parks. So that was her. So I was very proud of that. Worked a lot with Pride, although never sat on their board because I was chair of First City Network. Did a lot of, concurrent things with them to make sure Pride was a success. There were years Pride almost didn't pull it out. I mean, we didn't have enough money. I remember one year my ex and I actually paid the money to the city to rent the pavilion in Forsyth Park so that they could have a stage, because they didn't, they were low on funds. Other people, other women out there who were running Pride at the time, Maria Spears and Marge Wester, those girls, they took money out of their own pockets. I'm not even sure they ever got paid back to make sure Pride happened. So there was a lot of us together then that, spent a lot of our own money and to make sure that things were going on. Back, gosh, I wish I could remember years, and I wish I'd done this and had the years written down, but a good friend of mine, Tracy Walden, she's a police officer, Stafford, she's a police officer, and she's out lesbian, and she won't mind me saying that because she and I are friends, and we decided to form. We were getting some complaints. I was getting complaints at First City Network from people in the community saying that they were, particularly young guys, that were getting beat up or whatever, and going to the police, and the police were saying, sorry, that happened yesterday. There's not much we can do about it, whatever. So Tracy and I decided to we created a collaborative with at the time, trying to think who the chief was, but anyway, the chief granted permission for her to be the representative from the city. And so she and I formed the LGBTQ and Police Collaborative. And it still exists to this day. Doesn't do as much as it used to do for just lack of really many complaints. I think I've had one, maybe two in the last 2 years. Prior to that, earlier on, we had, quite a few. And so the whole premise of that was I created this committee as a, civilian, because it's hard to have the police look at the police, but as a civilian, and we had members of our group. If it needed to go deeper into our group, we had a social worker, we had a lawyer, we had people just from the community, we had LGBT trans. So we had good representation. So if there was a case that came before us that couldn't be, immediately resolved, it came to the committee, and the committee made a disposition as to what should happen next, and whether it be the police be, retrained or, whatever, or if it would be the community would be given another lesson as to, a better way to approach things. We did a lot of PSAs about cruising and stuff like that. I made the flyers myself and put them in all the bathrooms, all the gay bars. So, just trying to keep people safe. So that was back then.
Are you currently working on the Kensington Park historical significance? Is that still ongoing, or what is your involvement?
That's completed, and we are considered a historic neighborhood. And there's a few more things I'm going to work on with that. I want to overlay district, but that's another thing for Kensington. Back somewhere probably in 2000 and maybe 8, I sat on the Homeless Authority board here, and I became chair of the board. And one of the things that I did then was make sure that as the Homeless Authority, that we did a better job of outreach for LGBTQ. We had some, of course, anytime you have, homeless and you have limited number of spaces and beds, dealing with trans people is difficult, dealing with youth is difficult. So we worked out some arrangements for, how people that fell into those categories would be treated at the various facilities. So that was, very interesting and very rewarding for me. So.
Currently, can you speak about or talk about the Proud Task Force? You are a member, is that correct?
I'm a member. I'm one of the steering committee that has helped formulate our mission and vision, and it was an appointed by the mayor. And our whole reason for forming was, first of all, is to put more of a citywide recognition of LGBTQ people. And, we've been doing Pride in this city for a long, long time. Right prior to COVID, we had our first Pride parade. It was a huge success. We'd never had a parade before. We'd been denied application after application for years and years and years for the St. Patrick's parade. We were always told we just didn't fit the criteria. And there was always one excuse after another, but we knew what it was. But you know what? For many, many years, we kept on plugging away, putting in those applications and being denied, to say that, you denied us. So at some point, we just decided to do our own parade. And it was like I said, it was a huge success. And hopefully, when we get back to a little bit more normal, we can do that again.
And that was in 2019?
19
was that the first 19?
Yeah, 19 was the first parade.
First one. And COVID has stopped that currently. Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately.
How would you describe Savannah's current relationship with the LGBTQ community?
I think I think there's always room for improvement, always. But, I think the fact that, we've had strong mayoral support going way back, Floyd Adams was the support. Otis Johnson was the support. Edna Jackson was a huge supporter. Van Johnson is a huge supporter. So from a mayoral standpoint, we've always had really good support. I think they realized not only the value in us as a people, but the value in us as a constituent. So I also ran as the first openly gay candidate for city council. I'm not going to say I was the first gay city council candidate, but I was the first one that was open politically and that sort of thing. And now we're very happy to have Curtis Purdie elected as the first openly gay city council alderman. So that's a nice accomplishment for us. Nice to know I can maybe put a crack in the ceiling. So anyway, so we've always had the city's support. There was no discrimination ordinance, official discrimination ordinance. And so many years ago, it would have been through Otis, we did a proclamation. And there was a proclamation that included sexual orientation, gender identity, that sort of thing, but it was never an official policy per se. So with Van, we've actually moved that into policy and citywide. So one of the things we're looking at, and honestly, again, with COVID and just things being what they are, we're really hoping that any employee or entity that wants to work with the city has to follow a basic guideline of diversity and anti-discrimination to include those categories, which they often don't. So that's something we're working on. Again, with COVID changing a little bit of everything, we're also making sure that from the standpoint of the departments within the city that they have diversity training available. There are, particularly the police department, now they have had diversity training, but we're always looking to improve it. I know Tracy's always looking, in years past, we had to add more about trans people because that became more of a concern for people. So that was added. Same thing with the fire department, to look at that sort of thing. So I think the city's made a really good promise and effort to try to, incorporate just doing the right thing in all departments and making the resources available. So we're still working on that. So that's why I'm saying we still have a ways to go, but we're getting there. We're moving in the right direction.
You were speaking about your participation on the housing authority.
The homeless authority.
The homeless authority. Do you see that we as a community are making improvements in that area at the level that we need to for the homeless?
So the quick answer to that would be no. But then again, I don't know that any community is, because honestly, homelessness is happening faster than we have the ability, the resources, and the support to do it, in my mind. We have a whole different group of homeless now, or nearly homeless, because of just the whole economy. So what's happened in the last 2 years, and that hasn't even really hit us yet. We'll see the trickle down of COVID probably in the next 5 years will be really bad. I'm also a realtor, and now when I retired from the business of mental health, I went into real estate. So I see that firsthand, how expensive things are, how crazy the housing market is. So people that were marginally able to afford somewhere to live now can't afford somewhere to live. And so they start up at, couch surfing or, staying with mom or whatever. And that changes over time. And then they become homeless. We've also seen, and have had, but I see more of it. And I think it's another reaction to the conditions that we're under is more drug use. So we're seeing more drug use homelessness. And that's a whole separate issue, the drug use and then the mental health issues of that. So, yeah, I think we've got a lot of work to do. It's a tough one. There's no simple solution. And I'm going to say this, and it's never been the most popular thing I say, but the old adage, build it, they will come. I sometimes say, tear it down, they'll go away. And I mean that only in the fact that some of the cities that I watch, because I'm really involved in my own way in homelessness, and some of the other cities that I've been watching, they have overbuilt or overgive or over whatever, and it basically become a homeless tourist destination. And Savannah is perfect for that. We've got tourism, we've got, a moderate climate. And if we're not careful, if we give too much, then we're liable to really, draw people in just as a homeless tourism spot. So.
I also noticed, and maybe you can talk about this, you specialize in an area for real estate for certain groups of people. Can you talk to that and how that maybe has helped some people find places to live?
Yeah, I'm a seniors real estate specialist. And what that means is I have both a designation and a passion for working with people that are probably either selling the family home or buying their last property, or trying to determine whether that makes sense for them or not. Because I'm semi-retired, selling is not my priority. It's making sure it's the right fit's my priority. So I find a lot of older people that have raised their families in their homes. They're first of all, there's way too much junk. I'm guilty of that myself. My kids will have to deal with it, but they've got way too much junk. They're overwhelmed with what to do. And they also know that they want a simpler lifestyle. They can no longer do the yard. They're living on fixed incomes. Can they stay and age in place? So one of the things I do is I go out there and help assess whether or not it makes sense for them to move from a financial standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and then also a physical standpoint. Or are there some suggestions that I can make to them to maybe do some things to help them age in place? Maybe open up some doorways, do some things like that, rip up carpet, things like, so they'll make it easier for them to traverse the house and stay in the home they're in versus, go someplace else. So it's been a lot of fun. And, sometimes I deal with people I've dealt with people whose spouses are dying and they need to do something. So it's a very emotional time for most of the people I work with in that position. But I'm grateful for my mental health background, because I think that really helps a lot to help guide them through that. So it's a blessing for me.
Great. What would you say to young people today in the LGBTQ plus community today? Sorry, mouthful there. I got tongue-tied. What would you say to young people today?
Well, it depends on what about. So one of the things is that there are supports out there. Look for supports. Last night I was in a panel discussion with some doctoral students that through First City Pride Center that we were talking about mental health and LGBT. If you're depressed, if you're getting a lot of negative feelings about coming out, or if you're afraid to come out, or you feel like no one, you're going to be rejected or whatever, there's support out there. There's still the youth program at the First City Pride Center. Now that things are opening up, go there, just walk in the door, go sit and talk to who's ever there. There's understanding people there. You can look for, go try to find other groups that have things that you like to do. So again, with the First City Pride Center, as we ramp back up, there will be more community opportunities to get together. And we see younger people doing those things. Some of the potlucks, it tends to be a little bit of older crowd, but the young people, they love, festivals, kids love festivals, but there are people out there. And it's a lot more normalized. And in Savannah, thanks to, the college environment here, and thanks to the city support, I think we have a community that a young gay person can come in and quickly find someone that they can relate to, and I think that, to just go have fun, be themselves, they are perfect just the way they are. That's what I tell young people. And I'm, I've had 2 children, but I have about 25 that I call my kids, that literally needed a supportive mom or grandmother figure, that were gay, that, didn't have that. So And I'm glad to do that. Christmas is a little expensive, but you know.
Well, did you have that support network though when you were younger? If you've offered that now, but did you?
No, of course not. No, it just wasn't. You know, I think we had it within our friends. You create the family that you didn't get. You know, yeah, no. So I think, you know, had I had a different environment, had it been a different time of our history, it would have been different, but it wasn't. So, you know, and it's just so easy to do. Grant, you know, I'm kind of, Van Johnson calls me the fairy godmother. And I think Mark Hill is the fairy godfather here. And, you know, he's done a lot. So we're kind of like the old guard. He and I were the old mama and papa. And, you know, he does as much on his end as I do on mine. I can't say, I mean, he really is my cohort in crime. And so, you know, there's always somebody out there willing to listen. There's always somebody out there willing to help. You know, if you need anything, you can just reach out. Somebody will be there. You know, if you can find us, we're there.
And can you think of anything else that you'd like to share about your experiences within Savannah's community?
Well, you know, I talked a little bit about my neighborhood. I have been the president of Kensington Park Neighborhood Association for about 15 years, I guess. They told me that I'm either going to have to die or find my own replacement to get out of the job. And nobody's stepping up, and I'm not laying down. So I guess I'm here for the duration. But it's been a lot of fun, a lot of challenge. It's helped me a lot to, you know, get to know the city and the inner workings of the city. There's always bureaucracy that we have to go through to make sure our neighborhood gets the attention that it needs. So, you know, it's a lot. It can be a lot of work, but it's good work, and it's for a good cause. And I mean, I guess that's just me, you know. You know, in the 60s, there was an expression, if not now, when, if not me, who? And I think I took that to heart, and I've lived my life that way. And I'm grateful for that opportunity.
All right. Anything else you wanted to speak to, or do you feel like you?
I don't know. I think I pretty much.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your history with us today.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the wonderful city of Savannah for doing this. Thank you for making sure that the history that we've worked so hard to achieve will be recorded for posterity, and that someday, 100 years from now, when somebody opens up this crazy time capsule, that they can remember I'm that crazy lady from Savannah. And thank you all for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.